Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well today. Wow, what an amazing upload I had last night. Lori-Ann was a great guest, and I'm looking forward to having her on in the future to share her New Hampshire encounters. Tonight, I'm going to narrate a couple of encounters I've been sitting on for a little bit, and I figured I'd share them with you. Before we get into today's upload, though, a couple links. As you know, I rely on my Patreon, my PayPal, and my merch to help this channel to continue to grow and go. All of those links are in the description below. I also have a second channel for creepypasta, fanfiction, and scary voice acting. Stories that, well, they really don't fit on this channel. Now, if that's anything that you're into, follow that link and give those stories a listen. You may just like what you hear. Now I've taken enough of your time, guys. Let's get on with today's upload. Shall we? Today's first encounter. I was driving west on Morgan Run Road near Lubbock Lane in Monongalia County, West Virginia. This is close to Cheat Lake. It happened on June 8th around 7:30. I was on my way back from my friend's house. After I drove past Lubbock Lane, I noticed a tall figure move out, then back into the trees. I wasn't driving fast, so I got a good look at it. Though it's hard for me to believe what I saw. It turned back and looked at me. I swear it was a wolf standing on two legs. The head was huge with dark, long hair. The body was almost like a powerful man, but it still had the characteristics of a wolf. I didn't get a good look at the legs, but they were definitely shaped like a wolf's. Very muscular arms with human-like hands and long fingers or claws. When it looked at me, the eyes seemed to twinkle or shine as the head moved. The face was a wolf's face, same snout and ears with a thick neck. I believe it had something in its right hand, but the body blocked it from view. It just looked at me for a few seconds and then took a few steps into the brush. That's all I saw. Today's second encounter. The location of this encounter is an area known as Homer's Gap, which is located in Logan Township in Blair County, Pennsylvania. Two men were traveling west on Homer Gap Road, approximately 2 miles from the turnoff onto Homer Gap Road from Grandview. And as they were in a wooded residential area, they noticed something standing off the side of the road. As they slowed, the light from a nearby house illuminated an 8 to 9 foot upright wolf, described as looking the same as the lichens from the movie Underworld. Wolf-like head covered in black and brown matted hair. Long muscular arms with human-like hands hanging down along the body. As they approached the creature, it immediately got down on all fours and sprinted across the road. It was then when they noticed it had large, black, human-like feet and hocked legs. The body had a huge chest and sparsely covered in hair, as well as a tapered body with muscular legs. The height of the back was higher than the vehicle's hood. As it crossed the road, it looked back at the vehicle when they noticed its bright golden eyes. After it crossed and moved into the woods, the driver floored the vehicle, almost losing control. Today's third encounter. I grew up an only child in rural Pennsylvania. I used to sneak out of my bedroom and go hang out in our backyard on summer nights when I had trouble sleeping or I woke up in the middle of the night. This was around the age of 6 to 8, mid-90s. I'd go sit just below the top of the backyard hill, where I was out of sight from our kitchen window. There were trees to the left with a wide open field across the rest of the mile-wide valley. We had a large hill with a bump in the middle that was perfect for sledding in the winter. Below that was a field with a deer trail cutting through the bottom of the hill, and a creek beyond at the center of the valley. On a clear night with a bright moon, you could see across the valley. I grew up in about a mile to where my best friend's house had their floodlights on all night behind their house. And when I say rural, I mean very rural Pennsylvania. Parent-teacher conferences were scheduled the first day of hunting season, and kids would often be out for a couple of days just for that. We had 2 houses in eye line of our house from the backyard. It was more than 30 miles to our nearest Walmart. I also grew up very familiar with deer, bear, rabbit, and I even saw a mountain lion once while hiking with family. All of this to say I am familiar with the wildlife there. The first night I saw a Dogman was like any other. I was chilling in the grass, thrilled to be just doing something my parents didn't know about. I saw something move quickly down along the deer trail. It was dark black against the rest of the night. Partway through its path from the woods beside my house, it noticed me and stopped. We just stared at each other for what felt like a long time. It stood up and its ears were long enough to notice from 100 yards or so. It was too thin to be a black bear, which I had already seen a few times at that age. The staring continued for a while. Eventually, it put its ears back down, put its front paws on the ground, and sprinted across the valley. I called it my werewolf because of the shape of it standing up. I don't think I told anybody. Like now, I loved having a secret. But after the first sighting, I went and sat outside a lot more. I remember once on the new moon I sat on the porch because I was too scared to go too far with how dark it was without the moon. I saw it 3 or 4 more times after that. It was usually running into the woods by my house, which were more than 10 full acres owned just for hunting season. My werewolf never bothered me after that, but I remembered I was really disappointed when it got cold outside and I'd have to stop going out at night because I wouldn't see it. Today's 4th encounter. While on vacation in Arizona in 2013, I was visiting family who lived on the edge of the Navajo Nation. The town they lived in is basically on the border of the reservation and such things. The family in question is my mother's brother and sister. They live together with their spouses in a modest home. But the home is unimportant. I went there during my childhood every now and then, and had several Navajo friends. So after a night out catching up with 2 of my old friends, whose names I will not mention because of the events that took place that night, I was driving the 2 of them home. The female friend, we'll call her Sue, was fast asleep in the right side of the back seat, while my male friend, whom we'll just call Jim, was wide awake in the left side of the back seat. As we are on our way to Jim's house, I see something on the side of the road that is briefly illuminated by my headlights. It looks like a large coyote walking down the side of the road on all 4s. Jim saw it first and pointed it out to me, so I slowed down and turned my brights on. What we both saw disturbed us so deeply that we had to wake Sue up to see if she would confirm that we were not crazy. When Sue woke up and looked out of the window, I had stopped the car at this point, she froze in place, and the thing, which had been walking along at a leisurely pace until now, turned around and stood up on its hind legs. It didn't look like a dog does when it stands up on its legs. It looked like it was used to doing it. Before Sue could shake herself out of the soul-crushing fear she was in, Jim and I got a good look at it. It was everything the stereotypical definition of a werewolf was, with a few key differences. We saw its snout was less like a wolf's and more like a hybrid between a wolf and a human, rounded with a dog's nose slightly protruding out and sharp teeth. And its hands and feet both had claws on them, which were seemingly permanently extended. That, or it was extremely hostile at that moment it saw us, or rather her. By the time we were done gawking at the thing, and fear started to take over curiosity, Sue snapped out of her own fear long enough to scream at me to drive as fast as I could. She refused to stop screaming until it was completely out of sight, and when we pulled over and she calmed down enough to regain coherency, we asked her what was going on. She explained that she couldn't tell us why, but she knew what that thing was, and that it wanted nothing but to hurt her and anyone related to her. When I dropped her off at her house, Jim and I as well felt obligated to walk her to the door. We asked if she was going to be okay, and she said she would tell her dad he was back and he would protect her like he always did. We just looked at her with concerned looks on our face and walked back to the car. On the way to Jim's house, we saw it again, but it was heading in an opposite direction. To Sue's house, we thought it was either another one or the same one, which had either gotten lost or visited someone else and was now going to Sue. Decided that it was our duty as friends of Sue to try to protect her from whatever this thing was. We turned around. But when we did, so the creature reared up once again and looked at us. Then something I will never forget happened. It let loose this deep, guttural roar directed right at us. The roar was so bestial in nature that it shook us both to our cores. Apparently, we weren't the only ones that were shaken as my car radio died and the engine shut off. I screamed at the top of my lungs, accompanied by Jim, and fumbled to turn the key back on. By the time the creature was halfway to our car, it was walking in the road toward us. I got it back on in time and floored it out of there as fast as possible. When I finally got slowed down enough to not break every speed limit in America, I realized I had passed Jim's house about 3 miles back. I didn't see the creature again that night, although I did drive by Sue's house again and everything seemed fine, no broken windows or signs of forced entry. And I haven't seen anything like it since. I don't know what to call it other than a skinwalker, but whatever it was hostile, and it plagued either the local community or one of my friends specifically. I've kept in touch with both Jim and Sue. She refuses to talk about it, and will only say things are fine when I ask about it. Jim can't get anything out of her either. I'm afraid for her. I'm afraid for everyone in that area. Today's fifth encounter. My father is Navajo, who was raised on the res in northern Arizona. My mom is white. She was raised in western Canada. I grew up in southern Cali. But I grew up going to the res every year. I eventually moved and worked there. Now, I'm no skinwalker expert by any means, but I'll share what I know. The earliest experience I had was on my first solo trip without my parents, out to our ranch on the res. I traveled with my cousin and a few of our friends. Our ranch is pretty much in the middle of nowhere. The nearest people, being at the very closest, are about 10 miles away. So we're pretty much on our own. Our first night out there, we arrived at around 2 in the morning and there was no moon. It was pitch black. We had a hard time finding our hogan, traditional octagon-shaped Navajo home. We decided to just camp near the cattle corral, which we did find. We set up tents and knocked out until sun came up. When I woke up, I took a little walk around our campsite and found coyote tracks which encircled our camp and actually got pretty close to the tents and campfire, which was pretty weird and a bad sign for several reasons. The rest of the day went without incident. We woke up, cooked breakfast, explored the north rim of the Grand Canyon on the reservation side, and checked out old hogans in the area. We stayed up particularly late that night. We had been out exploring at night and four-wheeling on some off-road trails. It was around 2 or 3 in the morning, and we were driving on a rocky road that went up into a small canyon. So there were hillsides pretty high and steep on both sides of me. I was standing in the back of the pickup with a spotlight. That's when I first saw the light. The best way to describe what I saw was a visual effect of when you're standing in your room and someone behind you takes a picture with a flash. There was a brief instant in which everything lit up behind me, but it was a dull orange-reddish light. I turned around towards where it came from and shined the spotlight around. There was nothing whatsoever. Just a bunch of rocks, which we thought was weird, but we kept on driving. Once on top of the hill, we stopped to look around and noticed the weird light again, but this time it was far away, at least several miles. It was the same color, but it looked like a muzzle flash from a gun. I waited to hear the gunshot, thinking it was people like us shooting at night, but it never came. Then we saw another flash, but this time it was several miles to the west and a little bit closer. Then another and another, closer and closer, all within a few minutes. We decided it was a little weird and without talking about it, turned around and went to the Hogan this time. We didn't really talk about it, the lights for some reason, and all settled down into the Hogan. There was myself, my cousin, and 2 of my white friends. We talked for a while, and it was at that moment when everybody stops talking, and everyone is just about to fall asleep when it happened. The door, there's only one door, a small little one that locks shut, shook violently, as if someone kicked the door as hard as they could. It was loud and strong enough to where you could hear the lock rattle and the door bounce back and rattle against the wooden frame. My friend shot up in bed and said, "What the fuck was that?" They had reason to be alarmed. We were very far from anyone else, and they knew it. It's extremely quiet out there, pretty much a deafening silence. And you can hear when vehicles are approaching. I got out of bed, grabbed a shotgun, and told my cousin to get his rifle. We walked to the door, motioned for him to come over, and said, "You go left, I'll go right." I'm really not sure why, but I wasn't scared despite the obvious weirdness of what was going on. I ripped the door open and we both slipped out one right after another and swept the area. Looked everywhere we could and went back to the truck and grabbed the spotlight and swept the area again. Nothing. No footprints, no animals, nothing. We decided to send a message and shot some rounds off to scare whatever it was away. I think we were all kind of worried, but we eventually went back into the Hogan and settled back in, kind of joking to calm our nerves. Eventually, they all fell asleep, but I hid my nervousness, and my heart was still racing. It wasn't until everyone was quiet and asleep that I noticed the thumping. I heard it very faintly through the rock walls, and then I put my ear to the wall. I heard it a lot better. It was a very rhythmic thumping sound, something very heavy and timed, the same thump. It sounded as if it was coming through the rock table that the Hogan sits atop of. I tried to rationalize it and told myself it was just the cows, and somehow managed to fall asleep. I woke up the next morning, and we went to check on the cows, which were about 10 miles away on the ranch, and hadn't been anywhere out near our Hogan that night. Several days later, after I told my aunt about what happened, they told me that one of my Navajo grandmas, who lived alone and out in the middle of nowhere, had weird things happen as well. The same night we had our door kicked, someone had knocked on her door in the middle of the night. When she opened the door, there was no one there. My aunts think it was a skinwalker who was messing with me and my cousin because we're a mixed race. I'm not sure that's the reason why it happened, but I do believe in skinwalkers. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed these 5 encounters as much as I enjoyed sharing them with you. Wow, what a day. Kids started school again, and it's virtual. Pretty much just wiped me out, and kind of wanted to get something out to you guys that was not too long, and kind of something very like a simplistic narration of some really cool encounters, and that's what I did. Couple days will be my birthday, and my plan for that is I am going to my first upload, I want to narrate a couple of my favorite encounters that I've stumbled across through the last couple of years. Then I'd like to have an interview, and possibly 2 interviews. I want to kind of do 2 narrations, 2 interviews, just spread out through the day to spend my birthday with you guys. I'm looking forward to that. So with that, guys, I am going to get this video uploaded, and I am going to hit the hay because I'm exhausted. Have a good night, guys, and thank you.